Hey everyone, I'm Jason Dean.
And I'm Colby Dane.
And this is Real Physics, where we tell you what would really happen in Hollywood productions.
Because our disbelief can only be suspended so far.
Well everyone, it was inevitable that we were going to have to cover this scene from Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
That's right. This week it's all about whether Shia LaBeouf could actually swing from tree to tree with it.
No, not that scene, the other scene.
Oh, the one with the aliens, that's right.
Not that scene either, the other scene.
Nuking the fridge.
Yeah. Alright, unfortunately, let's take a look.
So, for those of you who have spared yourselves from watching this, here's the setup. Han Solo has somehow found himself stuck inside the Call of Duty map Nuketown, with no way out.
Right, the countdown begins, and he frantically looks around for something to protect him from the blast.
Ah, perfect. There's a refrigerator waiting right there, just for him.
And see, they made it more plausible by making sure the audience knew that it was lead-lined, because no ordinary refrigerator would do.
So the nuke goes off just like it does at the end of every match, and here we get to see what happens on the outside of the map. First, there's the initial blast, and then there's the following shockwave that destroys everything in its path, sending all kinds of stuff flying.
Right, all this stuff goes flying, and you know, the director particularly made a point of showing the refrigerator with Han Solo inside of it flying right past this car driving full speed down the road.
It finally lands, and he looks like he just made the Kessel Run in the shortest time ever. Man, that looks absolutely torturous.
Yeah, and they didn't even ask him any questions.
So here we see the refrigerator has finally come to a rest, and somehow Deckard finds his way out of his carbonite encasement.
Right, so Deckard catches his breath, and he looks over and asks his new little friend here if he should go see what happened. And the little guy, of course, says, go for it.
Then he turns around, and there's what the explosion looks like from way outside the map boundaries.
Wow, okay. If he lived through that, then I call lag. Report player.
Am I getting these mixed up? Is this the right movie? Was his name Indiana?
No, we named it Gopher Indiana. Oh, but we can go with it.
Okay, so what we're meant to believe in this scene is that Indiana, in a refrigerator, could survive a nuclear blast and fly.
We can stomach the ionizing radiation and the heat and even the whole tumbling down that downhill slope in the refrigerator thing.
What we can't accept is that anything organic is going to fly that far and survive the force of that blast.
Right. First, some history and some research.
The Americana imagery of sepia homes being blasted personally gave me nightmares for most of my childhood. These images are actually from a civil defense video called Operation Q.
It's the set of this video that we are meant to believe that prior to the detonation, Indiana and the Russians confront one another.
In 1955, Operation Teapot detonated a number of sub-50 kiloton devices. It was during the last of these tests, Apple II, that the civil defense film was shot. So we're going to use data from that film in some of our analyses.
Historically, we also know that under the right conditions, a 16 kiloton blast is survivable. Akiko Takakura, shown here, not only survived the Hiroshima blast from 300 meters away in a bank lobby, but as of 2008 was still alive.
Nuclear blasts are, aside from the initial intense thermal and ionizing radiation, similar to conventional explosions, and in fact they are rated by their equivalent mass of TNT.
The explosion comes in phases. First, there's the static overpressure. This is the shock wave, and at a very high magnitude, it can cause internal tissue and brain damage.
Next, there is the dynamic overpressure. This is the blast wind that wrecks shop and knocks everything down. Immediately after the dynamic overpressure comes the receding flow, where the air sucks back towards the epicenter, but not nearly as fast as it arrived.
Okay, so it's the blast wind that we know empirically to be about 620 miles per hour. And its effects on the refrigerator that we're going to focus on.
Okay, so the way we're going to approach this is first we're going to figure out what the mass of the refrigerator is. Then we're going to figure out what the force of the blast on the refrigerator is. And from that we'll be able to figure out what the acceleration and final velocity is.
Alright, well, let's go do some math.
This refrigerator seems to be about 6 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot. So the frontal area is 1.7 meters.
A large refrigerator like this weighs in at about 160 pounds, and Indy is probably about 200 pounds.
Damn, really?
Yeah, he probably put on a little weight when he got to 60.
You mean 70?
Is he really that old?
Yes, can you believe it?
God.
Anyway, so we found out that you can get lab equipment with varying thicknesses of lead lining.
Right, so we're going to go with a 1/4 inch of lead, since 1 inch of lead sheathing would result in a 5,000 pound refrigerator, which is really ridiculous.
Okay, if you're storing something that requires 1 inch of lead sheathing in a refrigerator, you should probably consider not using a refrigerator. I mean, who stores their uranium-238 in a refrigerator anyway? I keep mine in the pantry.
Anyway, back to the fridge. Led the way!
Really? The volume of a hollow rectangular prism slightly smaller than the outside of a refrigerator is 0.04 cubic meters. The density of lead is 11.34 grams per cubic centimeter.
So the mass of the lead sheathing is 543 kilograms. The total mass of the fridge with Indiana is 706 kilograms, or a whopping 1,557 pounds.
Damn, that is a heavy fridge. So now what we really want is the acceleration of the refrigerator. This will tell us if the launch is survivable regardless of the other conditions.
Right, to find that, we go back to our old friend, force equals mass times acceleration. We estimated the mass, so now we need to figure out the force.
What the film actually got right was the two different pressure waves. First there's the initial blast, but what tears everything up are the blast winds that actually travel slower than the shockwave.
Right, from nuclear explosion data, we also know that at about a third of a mile from a 16 kiloton warhead, the blast winds are around 620 miles per hour. Now, if we look at the aerodynamic drag of a brick inside those 620 mile per hour winds, we can determine the force on the refrigerator. At that point, that will allow us to determine the acceleration.
Right.
Air at a scorching 500 degrees Fahrenheit has a density of about 0.045 pounds per cubic foot.
The coefficient of drag of a brick is about 0.82.
Right, for those of you who watched our very first episode, that probably looks familiar.
What is the drag coefficient of a brick?
Turns out it's 0.82. Now our nuke speed velocity is 620 miles per hour. We can determine the force of drag with this equation, and that works out to be 8,535 pounds, or about 3,871 kilograms of force.
So our acceleration due to the blast wind is 53 meters per second squared.
So we have an instantaneous acceleration of 5.5 Gs generated just from the wind. Ouch.
You know, I'm not sure it's going to be very comfortable in there.
Yeah, but it is survivable, and it turns out if the refrigerator was not lead-lined, the acceleration would have been closer to 25 Gs.
Right, it's the mass of the lead that saves him, not the shielding properties. Okay, so we can survive the G-forces, but what about the heat and the radiation?
We need to know how close he is to the blast.
Alright, well, let's go figure that out.
From the Apple II test video from the Civil Defense Department, the houses were placed about 3.5 seconds from the blast.
Knowing the speed of the blast being 620 miles per hour, and the time it took to get there, we can apply distance equals velocity times time.
So if Indy was in a house, and that house was about where the Apple II test houses were, then he would be about 1 kilometer away.
Historically, we know that inside of a sufficiently sturdy structure, a blast is survivable even at 300 meters.
So yeah, from a historical perspective, the blast force is survivable. The thermal radiation and light would have been absorbed or reflected by the house he was in, and even if the blast hit the refrigerator directly, the amount of Gs would have still been survivable.
Okay, let's look at the flying refrigerator. Worst case, we see the full 620 mile per hour winds for about 3/4 of a second, during which time we have the full acceleration from that wind. Now we can determine how fast a 706 kilogram refrigerator would be moving if it was accelerated at 5.5 Gs for 0.75 seconds.
Wow, I don't want to be the poor sap frozen in carbonite tumbling along in a refrigerator at 90 miles per hour or 145 kilometers an hour.
But remember, some of that blast would have been absorbed by the building, so that velocity is as if he got hit by the full blast.
As for the refrigerator overtaking the car, it is not possible as the scene shows. The refrigerator will always be traveling slower than the dynamic pressure wave. The scene shows the refrigerator passing the car, then the winds hitting the car. Last I checked, 90 miles an hour is slower than 620.
Right, so even though they got the conflagration, the static overpressure wave, and then the dynamic pressure wave all right, they still got this fundamental concept awesomely wrong. So, let's call it.
This is real-ish physics.
Wait, hang on, what?
Real-ish physics.
No, okay, hang on. Does Indy survive the explosion?
Theoretically, yes, real.
Alright, does Indy get knocked around inside the refrigerator?
Hell yes, real.
Okay, does the refrigerator go flying past the car into the distance?
No, real.
Alright, well, there you have it on all 3 counts. Until next time, thanks for watching.
See you next week. I hear a lot of people out there like smoke cigarettes and drink excessively and like do intravenous drugs. You know, I eat a little too much. So
hey, can you rustle me up some of that cracked?
I know. So damn that Mike. Damn you, Mike. Your last name is Hunt. Why Why don't you have a green mic cover?
That would be smart.
We can make green mic covers. We'll make trillions.
We can make green equipment.
What the acceleration and final velocity is.
Right, all right, let's go ahead and get to the math.
Final velocity is.
All right, well, let's get to some math.
You said it again! Oh, hairspeed velocity. We should have like a belly drumming episode.
But remember, some of that blast would have been absorbed by the building, so that velocity as is... So that velocity
And I'm Colby Gain! This is real-ish physics.
Wait, what?
What? What? Oh, shit! Go home, Colby Dane, you're drunk. Okay, as for overtaking the car, it is not possible as the scene shows. This is real physics.
Thanks for watching.